Hello, my name is William, and welcome to Dragon X Dominion, a realm where dragon legends are forged in fire, honor, and forgotten worlds. I will be your narrator and guide through these epic lands. If you crave powerful stories, legendary dragons, and wars that echo through eternity, then you found your home, ladies and gentlemen. So subscribe, and claim your place among these legends.
The heat shimmered off the sand in waves that made the horizon dance. Ray Collins wiped the sweat from his forehead and checked the fuel gauge on his truck. The big rig had been his home for 12 years now, hauling cargo across the Sahara route between the northern colonies and the southern mining operations. Most drivers hated this run. Too hot, too empty, too dangerous if something went wrong. Ray liked the quiet. His radio crackled with static. The nearest settlement was 400 kilometers behind him, and the next one was 300 ahead. Nothing but sand and rock and the occasional dead tree that somehow refused to give up. He'd seen stranger things out here. Sandstorms that came out of nowhere. Wild animals that shouldn't exist. Once he'd even spotted what looked like an old spacecraft buried halfway in a dune, though nobody believed him when he reported it. But he'd never seen anything like what was lying ahead of him now. Ray pressed the brake and brought the truck to a slow stop. His eyes weren't playing tricks on him. There was something massive in the sand about 200 meters off the road. Something pale, something that didn't belong. He should keep driving. That was the rule. Don't stop unless it's an emergency. Don't investigate strange things in the desert. Call it in and let the authorities handle it. Ray had followed those rules for 12 years without breaking them once. He turned off the engine and climbed down from the cab. The sand crunched under his boots as he walked toward the shape. The closer he got, the more his brain tried to make sense of what he was seeing. It was huge, maybe 5 meters long, covered in pale scales that looked almost white in the harsh sunlight. Wings folded against its sides, tattered and torn, a long tail half buried in the sand. A dragon, a real dragon, or what the scientists called a skyrend. Ray had seen pictures of them before. Everyone had. They were one of the few alien species that looked like something out of Earth's old myths. Big, winged reptiles with intelligence that rivaled humans, but they were rare, kept mostly in reserves or with their own clans out in the frontier territories, and they definitely weren't supposed to be lying alone in the middle of the Sahara. This one wasn't moving. Ray approached slowly, watching for any sign of danger. Skyrens were predators, fast, strong, and equipped with teeth that could tear through steel, but this one just lay there, its chest barely rising and falling. Sand covered most of its body. Its scales were dull and cracked. Its eyes were closed. Ray knelt beside its head. Up close, he could see the creature was young, maybe not even fully grown. Its horns were small, and its claws hadn't developed the heavy curve that adult skyrens had. Someone had left it here, abandoned it to die. The dragon's eye opened slightly. Silver, not the gold or red that most skyrens had. Silver eyes that looked at Ray with something that might have been hope or might have been just the last spark of life fading away. Ray had grown up on a farm. He'd raised animals his whole childhood. He knew what dying looked like. This dragon had maybe a day left, probably less. It was dehydrated, starving, and covered in wounds that had gotten infected. The pale coloring wasn't dirt or sand. It was the dragon's actual scales, some kind of genetic difference that made it stand out from the rest of its kind. Different meant weak in the animal world. Weak meant expendable. Ray stood up and walked back to his truck. He should call it in. Let the wildlife services handle it. They had the equipment and the training. He was just a trucker. He had a schedule to keep and a load of construction materials that needed to be in port said by tomorrow evening. He climbed into the cab and sat there for a full minute, hands on the steering wheel. Then he cursed under his breath and got back out. The loading ramp on his trailer groaned as it lowered. Ray had loaded plenty of heavy equipment before, but he'd never tried to move a 5-meter dragon. He backed the truck as close as he could get, then spent 20 minutes digging the sand away from the creature's body. The dragon didn't resist. It barely even moved. Ray used every bit of rope and cargo strap he had. He rigged a makeshift sling under the dragon's body and attached it to the truck's loading winch. The winch whined and complained, but it held. Slowly, centimeter by centimeter, he dragged the dragon up the ramp and into the trailer. By the time he finished, the sun was starting to drop toward the horizon. Ray was soaked in sweat and breathing hard. He secured the dragon as best he could, surrounding it with padding from the emergency supplies. Then he grabbed the water containers from behind his seat. The dragon's mouth was crusted with sand. Ray carefully pried it open and poured water inside. The creature swallowed weakly, then again and again. Ray used almost 20 liters before the dragon's eyes finally closed and its breathing evened out. Ray sealed up the trailer and climbed back into the cab. He started the engine and pulled back onto the road, heading south. His radio was off. His GPS tracker was on, but nobody was monitoring it this far out in the empty zone. Whatever he'd just done, he'd just broken about 15 different regulations and probably a few laws. He looked at the trailer in his side mirror. Inside was a dying dragon that someone had thrown away. A creature that was probably more intelligent than half the people Ray had met in his life. A living being that deserved better than being left to bake in the sand. Ray had never had much family. His parents were gone, no siblings, no wife or kids, just him and the road and the cargo he hauled from place to place. Maybe that's why he'd stopped. Maybe that's why he couldn't just drive past something that needed help. The desert stretched out endlessly ahead of him. The truck's engine rumbled its familiar song, and in the trailer behind him, something pale and broken was still breathing. Ray figured that was enough for now. The depot sat on the edge of what used to be a small town before the expansion. Now it was just a collection of warehouses, fuel stations, and a small office where drivers checked in and out. Ray pulled his truck into the loading bay 3 hours past his scheduled arrival time. His hands were shaking slightly on the wheel, and it wasn't from exhaustion. Wilson was waiting for him. The station manager was a short man with gray hair and a permanent frown that came from 20 years of dealing with truckers who always had an excuse for being late. He walked up to Ray's window before Ray could even turn off the engine. "You're late," Wilson said, not angry, just stating a fact. "Had some engine trouble," Ray replied. The lie came easier than he expected. "Had to stop and let it cool down." Wilson's eyes narrowed. He walked around the truck slowly, checking the tires and the trailer connections. Ray forced himself to sit still and not look nervous. The dragon was in the trailer, sleeping, hopefully. If it made any noise, if it moved enough to shake the trailer, Wilson would notice. "Engine seems fine now," Wilson said, coming back to the window. "Yeah, it sorted itself out." Wilson stared at him for a long moment. Ray had known the man for 8 years. They weren't friends, but they had the kind of professional respect that came from always being honest with each other. Ray had never lied to Wilson before today. "You want to tell me what's really going on?" Wilson asked. "Nothing's going on. Ray, I've been doing this job since before you could drive. I know when a man is hiding something." Wilson crossed his arms. "Whatever it is, it's your business, but if it's going to cause me problems, I need to know now." Ray met his eyes. "It won't cause you problems." Wilson held his gaze for another few seconds, then nodded. "All right, get your cargo unloaded and get out of here. And Ray, whatever you're doing, be careful." Ray unloaded the construction materials as fast as he could. The dock workers helped him, and nobody seemed suspicious. They were too busy complaining about the heat and talking about the football game that had happened last night. Ray barely heard them. His mind was on the trailer and the creature inside it. When the last pallet was off, Ray didn't even bother going into the office to file his paperwork. He just started the engine and drove. Wilson watched him go from the office window but didn't try to stop him. Ray's homestead was 40 kilometers from the depot, built on land that nobody else wanted. Too far from town to be convenient, too close to the desert to be safe. He'd bought it cheap 5 years ago and had slowly turned it into something livable. A small house with solar panels on the roof, a large shed for his truck, a well that barely produced enough water but was better than nothing. He backed the trailer up to the shed and opened the doors. The dragon was still unconscious, but its breathing was stronger than before. Ray set up a space on the floor with old blankets and tarps. Then he used the winch again to carefully lower the dragon down. It took another hour to get the creature settled. Ray brought every water container he had and set them nearby. He didn't have much food that a dragon could eat. Some dried meat from his own supplies, a few cans of fish. He laid them out and hoped the dragon would know what to do when it woke up. If it woke up, Ray went into his house and collapsed on his couch. His whole body ached. He should sleep, but his mind was racing. What was he doing? He just smuggled an alien creature past a government. Checkpoint, Skyrens were classified as dangerous megafauna. There were laws about owning them, transporting them, even being near them without proper authorization. If anyone found out, he'd lose his license, probably go to jail. He pulled out his tablet and started searching for information. Most of what he found was basic stuff he already knew. Skyrens were intelligent pack hunters from a planet called Rithkar. They'd made contact with humans about 40 years ago. Relations were friendly but complicated. Skyrens lived in clans with strict social structures. They valued strength and conformity. Ray found a research paper about genetic variations in Skyrens. Apparently, pale coloring was extremely rare, less than 1 in 10,000. The paper used careful scientific language, but Ray could read between the lines. Pale Skyrens were considered defective, weak. Most clans abandoned them shortly after birth. His tablet chimed with a message. It was from Wilson, just 2 words, "Be careful." Ray set the tablet down and walked back to the shed. The dragon hadn't moved. Its silver eyes were still closed. The wounds on its wings and sides looked worse in the artificial light. Some of them would probably leave scars even if they healed properly. Ray pulled up a chair and sat down next to the dragon's head. He didn't know why. The creature couldn't hear him, or if it could, it wouldn't understand. But sitting in silence felt wrong. "I don't know what I'm doing," Ray said quietly. "I've never taken care of anything like you before. Hell, I can barely take care of myself most days, but I couldn't just leave you out there." The dragon's chest rose and fell steadily. "My dad used to say that you can judge a person by how they treat things that can't fight back. He wasn't a great man, but he was right about that. And you can't fight back right now. So I guess that means I've got to help you until you can." Ray leaned back in the chair. The shed was quiet except for the dragon's breathing and the sound of the wind outside. He'd crossed a line today. There was no going back from this. Whatever happened next, he'd have to deal with it. But looking at the dragon, at its pale scales and its torn wings and its thin body that showed every rib, Ray couldn't bring himself to regret it. He'd saved something today, something that had been thrown away and left to die, in a universe that seemed to get colder and harder every year. That felt like it mattered. Ray stayed in the shed for another hour just watching the dragon breathe. Then he went back to his house, set an alarm for every 2 hours and tried to sleep. Every time the alarm went off, he checked on the dragon, gave it more water, made sure it was still breathing. By morning, the dragon's eyes were open. Those strange silver eyes fixed on Ray with an intelligence that made his breath catch. The dragon was awake, and now the real work would begin. 3 months passed like water through sand. Ray had expected difficulties, but he hadn't expected the dragon to be so stubborn about getting better. The creature he'd started calling Frost refused to give up, even when every bone in its body should have told it to quit. The name had come naturally. Those pale scales looked like frost on glass, and the silver eyes reminded Ray of ice crystals catching moonlight. Frost seemed to understand it was a name after the 3rd or 4th time Ray used it. The dragon's head would turn whenever Ray said it, and those intelligent eyes would focus on him with an attention that was almost unsettling. Feeding Frost had nearly bankrupted him. Dragons ate a lot. Ray had learned that the hard way when Frost devoured everything he'd set out in the first 2 days and still looked hungry. Ray had driven back to the depot and bought every bit of protein he could afford. Dried fish, frozen meat, even some expired rations that Wilson let him have cheap. He didn't ask what Ray needed it all for, and Ray didn't volunteer the information. Frost ate everything. Slowly at first, carefully, like the dragon was afraid the food might disappear. But as the weeks went on and Ray kept providing, Frost started to relax, started to trust that there would be more tomorrow. The dragon grew stronger. The ribs that had shown through the skin disappeared under healthy muscle. The wounds healed, leaving pale scars across the already pale scales. The wings straightened out and the tears in the membrane started to close. Frost still couldn't fly, but at least the wings could fold properly now. Ray had taken a leave from work, told the company he had family issues to deal with. They'd given him a month, which had turned into 2, which had turned into 3. His savings were almost gone. He'd have to go back to work soon, but he kept putting it off. Frost needed him. And Ray was starting to realize. He needed Frost too. The dragon followed him everywhere. When Ray worked on the house, Frost would lie in the shade nearby and watch. When Ray tended to his small garden, Frost would carefully step around the plants, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. When Ray sat on his porch in the evening, Frost would curl up beside the steps, head resting on its forelegs, eyes half closed but always aware. Ray talked to Frost constantly. About his day, about the truck, about the weather, about nothing at all. He knew the dragon probably didn't understand most of it, but Frost listened. The dragon's ears would perk up when Ray spoke, and sometimes Frost would make soft, chirping sounds in response. Those chirps were how Ray realized just how intelligent Frost actually was. It started with simple things. Ray would point at the water container and say water, and Frost would look at it. After a week when Ray said water, Frost would walk over to the container without prompting. Same with food and shed and house. The dragon was learning. Ray started teaching Frost hand signals, raised palm for stop, pointing finger for come, circular motion for turn around. Frost picked them up in days. Within a month, the dragon responded to over 20 different signals. Ray had trained dogs before. Frost was learning 10 times faster than any dog ever had. The Okonkwo family discovered Frost on a Tuesday afternoon. Ray's nearest neighbors lived 3 kilometers away, which was close by desert standards. They'd come by to borrow some tools and had instead found Ray in the yard with a full-grown skyrend lying next to him like an oversized cat. The father, David, had frozen in his tracks. His wife, Grace, had grabbed their daughter and pulled her back toward their truck. Amara, who was maybe 8 years old, had squirmed free and stood staring at Frost with wide eyes. "Ray," David had said carefully, "there's a dragon in your yard." "Yeah," Ray had replied. "Her name's Frost." "That's a skyrend." "I know. Skyrends are dangerous." "Some are." Ray had stood up slowly, keeping himself between the family and Frost. "This one's not." Frost had lifted her head and looked at the newcomers with those silver eyes. Ray had felt his heart pounding. He'd known this moment would come eventually. He just hadn't expected it to be so soon. Amara had taken a step forward. "She's pretty." "Amara, no," Grace had said sharply. But Amara had already slipped past her parents and was walking toward Frost. Ray had moved to intercept, but Frost had done something that surprised everyone. The dragon had lowered her head to the ground and made a soft, almost musical sound. Not a chirp, something gentler. Amara had stopped a meter away and giggled. "She sounds like she's singing." Ray had knelt down next to Frost's head. "Easy, girl, easy." Frost had kept her head down, eyes half closed, staying perfectly still. Amara had reached out slowly and touched Frost's nose. The dragon hadn't moved. "She's warm," Amara had said with wonder in her voice. David and Grace had relaxed slightly, though David still looked ready to grab his daughter and run. Over the next hour, Ray had explained everything. How he'd found Frost, how he'd been taking care of her, how intelligent she was, how gentle she was despite what the regulations said about skyrens being dangerous. The Okonkwos had left eventually, but they'd come back the next day. And the day after that. Amara had started bringing scraps from their meals, and Frost had accepted them with careful delicacy. The dragon seemed to understand that Amara was young and fragile. Frost moved slower around her, kept the claws retracted, kept the teeth hidden. Ray had watched those interactions with something tight in his chest. Frost wasn't just smart, she was empathetic. She understood that Amara needed to be treated differently than Ray. She adjusted her behavior without being told. That was when Ray had started to fully understand what he'd saved from the desert. Frost wasn't just an animal, she wasn't even just intelligent. She was a person. Different biology, different language, but a person nonetheless. Someone who felt and thought and learned and cared. Someone who'd been abandoned by her own kind and left to die because she looked different. Ray sat on his porch one evening, watching Frost play with Amara in the yard. The dragon would gently toss a ball with her nose, and Amara would run after it laughing. Frost's tail swayed back and forth like she was enjoying the game as much as the little girl was. Grace and David sat next to Ray on the steps. "She's amazing," Grace said quietly. "I've never seen anything like her." "Me neither," Ray admitted. "What are you going to do?" David asked. "I mean long-term, you can't keep her hidden forever." Ray had been thinking about that question for weeks. He didn't have an answer. All he knew was that Frost was family now. Real family, the kind you chose, the kind that chose you back. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The Rangers arrived on a Thursday morning while Ray was fixing the fence. Two vehicles rolled up his dirt road, kicking up dust that hung in the air like smoke. Frost had been dozing in the shade of the shed, but her head snapped up the moment she heard the engines. A low rumble started in her chest. "Easy," Ray said, walking over to her. He put his hand on her neck, feeling the tension in her muscles. "Easy, girl." 4 people got out of the vehicles. 3 wore the gray uniforms of Galactic Authority Rangers. The 4th wore a suit despite the heat. Ray recognized the type immediately. Government official. The kind who showed up when things were about to get complicated. The lead ranger was a tall woman with dark skin and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She walked toward Ray with the confidence of someone who'd done this job 1,000 times before. Her nameplate read, Brennan. "Ray Collins?" she asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. "That's me." Brennan glanced at Frost, who was now standing, wings partially spread in a display that Ray had learned meant she was nervous. "That's an unregistered Skyrand." "Her name's Frost," Ray said. "We received a report 3 days ago from a Skyrand clan leader on Rithkar. They claimed a defective juvenile from their clan had died in the desert 4 months ago. Satellite imagery from that time period shows your truck stopped at the exact location where the body should have been." Brennan pulled out a tablet and showed Ray the images. 2 hours later, thermal scans show your trailer carrying something large and warm. Ray said nothing. There wasn't much he could say. They had him dead to rights. The man in the suit stepped forward. "Mr. Collins, I'm Officer Brennan's legal advisor. You're in violation of at least 7 different regulations regarding the transportation and ownership of dangerous megafauna. The penalties include fines, imprisonment, and immediate confiscation of the creature." Frost's rumbling grew louder. Her silver eyes fixed on the strangers with an intensity that made even Brennan step back slightly. "She's not dangerous," Ray said. "She's never hurt anyone." "That's not relevant," the advisor said. "The law is absolute on this matter. Skyrands require special containment facilities and trained handlers. You're a civilian with no authorization whatsoever." "She'll die in a containment facility," Ray said. "You know that as well as I do. They'll put her in a cage and forget about her." Brennan's expression softened slightly. "I understand your concern, Mr. Collins, but we have procedures for a reason. Skyrands are powerful predators. One incident, one person hurt or killed, and the consequences would be severe." "She's been around people," Ray said. "Children, she's gentle with them. She's smart enough to understand who needs protection and who doesn't." "Again, not relevant." The advisor checked his tablet. "We're authorized to seize the animal immediately. However, Officer Brennan has convinced me to give you 48 hours to make arrangements." "Arrangements for what?" "To say goodbye," Brennan said quietly. "To prepare the animal for transport. It's more than most people get in situations like this." Ray felt something cold settle in his stomach. Frost pressed against his side, her head level with his shoulder. He could feel her heart beating against his ribs, fast and frightened. "She's not an animal," Ray said. "She's a person. She thinks and feels and learns. You can't just lock her away." "We don't have a choice," Brennan said. She actually looked sorry about it. "The law doesn't distinguish between intelligent and non-intelligent megafauna. They're all treated the same." "Then the law is wrong." "Maybe, but it's still the law." Brennan handed him a card with contact information. 48 hours, Mr. Collins. After that, we come back with enforcement and tranquilizers. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." The Rangers got back in their vehicles and drove away. The advisor lingered for a moment, looking at Frost with something like curiosity. "She really is unusual looking," he said. "Those silver eyes, I've never seen that in a Skyrend before." "She's special," Ray said. "Unfortunately, that doesn't change anything." The advisor got in the second vehicle and they drove off, leaving Ray and Frost alone in the yard. Ray sat down on the ground and Frost immediately curled around him, her body forming a protective circle. She made soft, chirping sounds, the kind she usually made when she wanted comfort or was offering it. Ray leaned against her warm scales and tried to think. He could run, pack up the truck, and disappear into the deep desert where the Rangers couldn't follow. But that was just delaying the inevitable. They'd find him eventually. And living on the run with a dragon was probably impossible anyway. He could fight, refuse to let them take her. But that would just get him arrested and Frost confiscated anyway, maybe even hurt if she tried to defend him. He could surrender, let them take her. Visit her in whatever facility they put her in, if they even allowed that. Watch her waste away in a cage, all that intelligence and personality slowly dying because she had nothing to do and no one who understood her. All the options were terrible. The Okonkwo's arrived an hour later. Amara ran straight to Frost, hugging the dragon's neck. Frost carefully wrapped one wing around the little girl, making that singing sound she'd made when they first met. "We heard," David said. "Someone at the depot saw the Rangers heading this way and called us." "They're giving me 48 hours, Ray said. "Then they take her." Grace sat down next to him. "There has to be something we can do." "Like what? Fight the Galactic Authority?" "Maybe not fight," David said slowly. "But there are other ways to push back, legal ways." "I can't afford a lawyer. I can barely afford to feed Frost." "You don't need to afford one." David pulled out his phone. "You need a lot of people to care, and I think I know how to make that happen." Over the next 6 hours, the Okonkwo's worked. David called friends. Grace posted on social media. Amara made a video of Frost gently playing with her, the dragon moving with careful precision to avoid hurting the child. The video showed Frost's intelligence, her gentleness, her personality. By evening, the video had 10,000 views. By midnight, 100,000. The local news picked it up. Then the regional news, then the planetary networks. People started showing up at Ray's property. Reporters first, then protesters. They set up camps along the road, holding signs that said, "Save Frost and dragons are people too." The story spread across human networks like wildfire. The trucker and his dragon. The creature left to die, saved by compassion. Ray watched it all with a sense of unreality. This wasn't his life. He was just a driver, just a man who'd made a choice in the desert. But somehow that choice had become something bigger. Frost stayed close to Ray through all of it, sensing his distress. When reporters tried to get too close, she'd position herself between them and Ray. When the crowds got loud, she'd make that rumbling sound until they quieted down. Ray lay awake that night in the shed with Frost. The dragon had her head on his chest, breathing slowly. Outside, he could hear the protesters singing. Inside, everything was quiet. "I don't know how to protect you," Ray whispered. "I don't know if any of this will work." Frost made a soft chirp. Her silver eyes opened and looked at him with perfect trust. Ray put his hand on her head. "But I'm going to try, I promise you that. I'm going to try." The morning of the deadline arrived with a sky so clear it hurt to look at. Ray hadn't slept. Neither had most of the protesters, who now numbered in the hundreds. They'd set up tents and banners all along the road leading to his property. News drones circled overhead like mechanical vultures, broadcasting everything to millions of viewers across human space. Ray stood in his yard with Frost beside him, watching the sun rise. The dragon pressed against his leg, and he could feel her shaking slightly. She knew something was wrong. Animals always knew when the people they loved were scared. David approached with a tablet in his hand. The petition hit 5 million signatures overnight. The Galactic Council is getting flooded with messages from human colonies. There are protests happening on Earth, Mars, the belt stations, everywhere. Will it matter? Ray asked. I don't know, but it's something. David showed him the screen, messages from all over human space. People sharing their own stories of Skyrens they'd met, creatures they'd saved, animals they'd loved that the law said they couldn't have. A movement was building, something bigger than just Ray and Frost. But movements took time, and Ray's time was up. The Ranger vehicles appeared at exactly 9 in the morning, right on schedule. But this time there were 6 of them instead of 2. Brennan led the group again, but her face was harder than before. Behind her were 10 Rangers in full tactical gear, carrying equipment that looked designed for capturing dangerous animals. Tranquilizer guns, net launchers, restraints. A woman Ray didn't recognize got out of the lead vehicle. She was older, maybe 60, with white hair cut short and sharp eyes that took in everything. She wore a formal uniform with insignia that marked her as someone important. Very important. Mr. Collins, she said, her voice carrying across the yard. My name is Yuki Tanaka. I'm a council arbitrator. I've been assigned to personally assess this situation before any action is taken. Ray felt a small spark of hope. An arbitrator. The public attention this case has received makes it politically sensitive. The council wants to ensure we handle it properly. Tanaka walked toward Frost without any apparent fear. The dragon watched her approach, head lowered slightly, wings tight against her body. Tanaka stopped a meter away. May I examine her? Ray nodded. Frost easy let her look. Frost remained still as Tanaka circled her slowly, taking in every detail. The arbitrator pulled out a scanner and ran it over Frost's body, checking vitals and bone structure. Then she did something unexpected. She sat down on the ground in front of Frost and looked directly into those silver eyes. Hello, Tanaka said softly. Frost tilted her head, studying the stranger. Then she made a soft, chirping sound. Remarkable, Tanaka said. She's trying to communicate. The arbitrator pulled out a puzzle box, the kind used to test animal intelligence. She set it on the ground between them. Can you open this? Frost looked at Ray. He nodded. Go ahead, girls, show her what you can do. The dragon studied the puzzle for a moment, then used her claws to manipulate the sliding pieces. It took her less than 30 seconds to solve it. Inside was a piece of dried meat. Frost ate it, then pushed the box back toward Tanaka with her nose. Tanaka set up 3 more puzzles, each one more complex than the last. Frost solved all of them. The final one required understanding cause and effect across multiple steps. The dragon worked through it methodically, occasionally pausing to think before making the next move. The crowd of protesters had gone silent, watching. The news drones moved closer, capturing everything. Her cognitive function is exceptional, Tanaka said, standing up. Well beyond what's typical even for Skyrens. Mr. Collins, I need you to demonstrate her social understanding. Can you do that? What do you want me to do? Show me how she interacts with vulnerable individuals. Children, elderly, anyone who might be at risk if she lost control. Amara was already running forward before her parents could stop. I'll show you. She ran straight to Frost and hugged her neck. Frost immediately went into what Ray thought of as gentle mode. All her movements became slower, more careful. She wrapped one wing around Amara but kept her claws retracted and her teeth hidden. Watch this, Amara said. She held up a ball. Frost, catch. She threw the ball weakly. It landed a meter away. Frost could have grabbed it easily, but instead she nudged it with her nose back toward Amara, letting the little girl pick it up and try again. The third throw went high. Frost caught it gently in her mouth, being careful not to puncture it with her teeth, then brought it back and dropped it at Amara's feet. "She's protecting me," Amara said proudly. "She always protects me." Tanaka watched for several minutes as Amara played with Frost. Then she asked Ray to demonstrate command responses. Frost performed perfectly. Sit, stay, come, turn, stop. Every hand signal Ray had taught her, she followed instantly. "Emotional control," Tanaka said. "That's what I really need to see. Mr. Collins, I want you to pretend to be in distress. Don't tell her what to do, just act scared." Ray felt awkward doing it, but he forced himself to stagger backward and fall down, clutching his chest. Frost reacted immediately. She was at his side in seconds, making worried, chirping sounds. She nudged him gently with her nose, checking to see if he was hurt. When he didn't respond, she positioned herself over him protectively and let out a loud call that made everyone jump. But she didn't attack, didn't lash out at anyone nearby. She just protected Ray and called for help. Ray sat up slowly. "I'm okay, girl, I'm okay." Frost checked him over carefully, sniffing and looking for injuries. Only when she was satisfied did she step back, though she stayed close. Tanaka was writing notes on her tablet. She looked at Brennan. "Your assessment." "She's extraordinary," Brennan said. "I've worked with trained Skyrens before. She's more controlled than most of them, and those had years of professional training. Collins did this in 3 months." "No," Tanaka said. "Collins didn't do this. The dragon did. He simply gave her the opportunity." She turned to Ray. "Mr. Collins, do you understand what makes this situation different from typical megafauna ownership?" "Frost isn't property," Ray said. "She's family." "Exactly, and the law as currently written doesn't account for that distinction." Tanaka looked at Frost, then at the crowd, then at the drones. "I came here expecting to enforce a confiscation, but what I've seen today changes things." She raised her voice so the crowd and cameras could hear. "Intelligence, emotional control, social awareness, and genuine bond between species. These are the hallmarks of companionship, not ownership. The laws we have were written for animals, but this dragon is not just an animal." Ray held his breath. "I'm proposing a new legal category to the council," Tanaka continued. "Companion status for exceptional individuals of megafauna species. It will require training certification, regular assessments, and strict guidelines, but it will allow bonds like this one to exist within the law rather than outside it." The crowd erupted in cheers. Ray felt his knees go weak with relief. "Mr. Collins," Tanaka said, turning back to him, "will you agree to the terms I've outlined? Regular check-ins, training certification within 6 months, and public demonstration that Frost remains safe to be around people." "Yes," Ray said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." "Then consider Frost the first legally recognized companion Skyrend in human space." Tanaka smiled. "Congratulations, you've changed the law." Frost made a happy chirping sound and pressed against Ray. He wrapped his arms around her neck, feeling tears on his face. Around them, the protesters were celebrating, and the news drones captured everything. Brennan approached and extended her hand. "For what it's worth, I'm glad it worked out this way." Ray shook her hand. "Thank you for giving us the time." "Thank Tanaka, she's the one who pushed for this assignment." Brennan looked at Frost. "Take care of her." "I will, always." 6 months later, Ray stood in the parking lot of a rest stop watching the sun set over the mountains. His truck was parked in the special bay he'd had installed, modified with a larger trailer that had proper ventilation, climate control, and enough space for Frost to move comfortably. The dragon was curled up inside, dozing after a long day of driving. The certification training had been intense but worth it. Ray had learned proper care techniques, emergency protocols, and communication methods that made his self-taught approach look crude. But the instructors had been impressed by how much Frost already understood. They'd called her. Natural, though Ray knew the truth. Frost was just incredibly smart and incredibly determined to stay with him. Other changes had followed. After Frost's story went public, more people came forward with tales of abandoned skyrens they'd found and hidden. Pale ones, small ones, ones with different colored scales or odd wing shapes. All of them discarded by their clans for not fitting the standard. All of them saved by humans who couldn't stomach the idea of leaving a thinking being to die alone. The council had fast-tracked the companion program. Within 3 months, 27 skyrens had been given legal companion status. The number was growing every week. Some clans on Rithkar were furious about it. Others were quietly relieved. Apparently, the practice of abandoning defective young had been causing tension within their society for years. The humans had just given them an acceptable alternative. Ray's communicator buzzed. A message from Wilson at the depot, another run available if Ray wanted it. Fusion cores from Mars to the colony on Titan, 3-week journey, good pay. Ray texted back, "Can Frost come?" Wilson's response was immediate. "Company policy says yes now. You two are practically celebrities. Marketing wants photos." Ray smiled and put the communicator away. He walked back to the trailer and opened the side door. Frost lifted her head and chirped a greeting. "Want to go to Titan?" Ray asked. Frost stood up and stretched, wings spreading as far as the trailer would allow. She made a sound that Ray had learned meant yes or agreement or sometimes just, "I'm happy." He'd gotten pretty good at reading her moods over the past months. They'd fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Ray drove while Frost rested or watched the scenery through the reinforced windows. During stops, Frost would stretch her legs and wings while Ray handled the cargo. People would gather to see her, to take pictures with her. Frost tolerated it with patience, seeming to understand that this was part of their new life. But the best times were the quiet ones. The evenings when they'd find an empty rest stop, and Ray would sit outside the trailer with Frost beside him, just watching the stars. Those were the moments when Ray remembered why he'd stopped in the desert that day. Not because of what Frost could do or how smart she was or what she represented for human-alien relations. He'd stopped because she'd needed help. Because leaving someone to die alone was wrong, no matter what species they were. Everything else had followed from that one simple choice. A family pulled into the rest stop. 2 parents and 3 kids. The youngest, maybe 5 years old, saw Frost and gasped, "Dragon." The parents looked nervous, but Ray was used to it now. "Her name's Frost. She's friendly if you want to meet her." The kids approached slowly. Frost lowered herself to the ground and folded her wings tight, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. The youngest child reached out and touched her nose. Frost made her singing sound. "She's soft," the child said with wonder. Ray watched them interact for a few minutes. The parents relaxed once they saw Frost's gentleness. They asked the usual questions. How long had Ray had her? Was she really intelligent? Could she breathe fire? Ray answered patiently. No, Skyrens couldn't breathe fire. That was just a myth. But yes, she was really intelligent, and they'd been together for 9 months now. The family eventually moved on, the kids waving goodbye to Frost. The dragon waved back with one wing, a gesture Ray had taught her that always made people laugh. Ray leaned against Frost's side. "You're getting famous, you know that." Frost chirped and nudged him with her head. "Yeah, I know you don't care about that." Ray scratched behind her ear ridge where she liked it. "You just want the food and the company." The dragon made a rumbling sound that might have been agreement or might have been contentment, probably both. Ray thought about the life he'd had before Frost, driving alone for weeks at a time, eating in empty diners, sleeping in the cab of his truck with nobody to talk to but himself. It hadn't been a bad life, just a lonely one. Now he had family, real family, the kind that chose to stay even when things got difficult, the kind that trusted him completely and expected the same in return, the kind that made the universe feel a little less cold and empty. "We should get moving," Ray said, standing up. "Got a long trip ahead of us." Frost stood as well, following him back to the truck. Ray secured the trailer and climbed into the cab. Through the internal camera, he could see Frost settling into her space, head resting on the padded floor, eyes already half closed. Ray started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. The road stretched out ahead of them, lit by the truck's headlights and the stars above. His communicator showed the route to Titan, the various stops they'd make along the way, the estimated arrival time. But Ray wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about how strange life could be, how one moment could change everything, how stopping for something that needed help could lead to this, to having someone who depended on him and who he depended on in return. The desert had tried to bury Frost. Her own kind had abandoned her to die because she was different. The universe had decided she wasn't worth saving. But Ray had decided differently, and that decision had mattered, not just for Frost, but for all the other Skyrens who came after her, for all the families that were being formed between humans and creatures that both species had thought couldn't coexist. Ray glanced at the camera feed again. Frost was asleep now, breathing slowly and evenly, safe, protected, loved. He smiled and focused on the road. They had deliveries to make and places to go, but more importantly, they had each other. In a galaxy that could be harsh and unforgiving, that was more than enough. Family wasn't about blood or scales. It wasn't about being the same species or speaking the same language. It was about who stayed when the desert tried to bury you. It was about who chose to stop when everyone else would have kept driving. It was about caring for someone not because the law said you should or because society expected it, but because it was the right thing to do. Ray had learned that lesson in the sand and the heat, staring at a dying dragon that nobody else wanted. And he'd carry that lesson with him for the rest of his life. The truck rolled on through the night, carrying a man and a dragon toward whatever came next. Together, the way family should be.